Let's call this dependability, dependency, and imaginary friends. I'm interested in how people insert themselves into conversations. That is, how they indicate they have something to say. They're done listening, it's their turn to talk. They don't always do that, interject, by talking. Nick Jenkins, the narrator of Anthony Powell's vast series, A Dance to the Music of Time, observes at a luncheon among his in-laws and the obsolete writer St. John Clark, who has said something to rouse Roddy Cutts, who was married to one of Nick's wife's older sisters. This is Roddy Cutts, MP. Nick observes, he, that is Roddy, began to move forward his knives and forks so that they made a pattern on the table, evidently a preliminary to some sort of speech, so that just as St. John Clark is about to expand his point, Roddy does cut him short. Nick is right. But few of us, at least men, are as observant. We don't see clues. We have to hear them, especially if we are the ones talking and we're not looking at our listeners, but the contents of our minds, scrabbling through papers on an extremely cluttered desk looking for the right one. Someone's got to speak up to wake us up, bring us back into the physical present. Well, that's a common way to be followed with think. What I think, or what I would have done, or what I know from my side, which leads me to believe, meaning, enough from you, the floor is now mine. My friend Bob Castle's nephew, oddly called Neff, wanders back into conversation, very polite about it, as if he'd been called away, but is glad to be back. Polite, but altering the rules. It's suddenly come to him. You know what I should have said, he puts in, and turns the conversational clock back. Here's the feeling I get, and perversely, I like it. You know what I should have said? It's like you're in the fourth quarter and you're up 16, and Neff has somehow prevailed on the ref to reset the clock to the middle of the third quarter when the game was tied, and now he's got the floor with what he should have said, and he's up 3. Roz, who deigns to copes with, bravely lives with me, just says, so, which could be interrupting or not. She could be encouraging. So, what happened next? Or quite the opposite. So, that wasn't very bright, was it? Or like Neff, she could be altering the rules, but in her case, by changing the topic. So, and she goes on or off in a completely different direction. You're talking about hot air balloons. So, where were you thinking of for dinner? Roz also interrupts herself, but not with so. Okay. You look up, realizing there's been some internal dialogue going on. When you hear that, okay, that always sounds encouraging to me. She's saying to herself, that's done? Okay. Next thing, okay. When she looks at me, however, and says, okay, it's a rebuke, the gentlest rebuke. But it means whatever I'm saying, doing, thinking, wishing for, or dreaming about. Okay, it's time to move on. Okay, next thing. Okay, so I was one of those. I had an imaginary playmate who had the unlikely name of Apostonize Hogan. How to spell that? Hogan, of course. Apostonize I never thought about, though I'm guessing now Oppostonize, and when I see the letters in my mind, I'm thinking how closely related the name is to opposition. Apostonize, opposition. Which makes sense because we were rivals in everything, and the rivalry wasn't always friendly. It was seldom friendly. It may never have been friendly. It was constant. And both of us were always back for more. He was back. This despite I always won. But the contests were also always extremely close. Up to the end, anyone could have won. So if I always did, Hogan was never entirely defeated. He was always back for more. Every time he was back with the same red-headed confidence he would prevail, as if he were the one that never lost. He was not only red-headed, incidentally. He was from another time and another place. Always dressed like a Brooklyn newsboy from the early 1900s. Flat cap, moth-eaten sweater, +4s. On the tip of his tongue, the hoarse cry, "Read all about it! How I'm going to beat your butt." But we may have been rivals, sometimes even bitter rivals, but he had a likably crude way about him, but appealing to the 9 or 10-year-old me. And maybe he would beat my butt. Maybe he always beat my butt. It wasn't, as I thought, the other way around. Since all the games were imaginary as well as invented on the spot, and it wasn't clear until near the end, at the very end, or sometimes even in retrospect, what the goal of the game was exactly, neither was it clear. Could it have been clear who would win, who did win, or who had won? So I was sure I did, even if occasionally I had to resort at the last to some trickery. Maybe in his mind he was just as sure. He was the ever victor, and I was the always vanquished. The games were that indeterminate, involving or making use of whatever happened to be at hand: acorns and sticks, tar from the street, moss, anthills, gravel, pine cones. And the object of any contest evolved as play progressed. Acorns looked very much alike, for example, so whose was whose? And what had been the goal? Sure, the maple in the corner of the yard where the driveway emptied into the street, but which part of the tree? Or the tree in relation to what? Was it just closest to the tree? Or was it closest to the tree on the driveway side? Or on the lawn side? Or closest without going beyond, or closest not coming up short? And whose stick actually stirred that ant out of the mound? And then focusing on that one, it was just easy to lose count of the points. That one's my point? No. Without a decibel meter, how could you tell whose stick cracked the loudest when it snapped? You could argue or go again. No, again. Until enough was enough, and Hogan went home defeated or victorious. Home. I wasn't sure where he lived. We always played in my yard, but it must have been somewhere. He didn't emerge out of thin air, as if the friendship, the rivalry were something I conjured up. He actually showed up, and according to his own timetable, as far as I could tell, as I did. Neither of us was dependent on the other, though he was dependable in a way no one else I've ever known. Always exactly the same, always looking the same, dressed the same knock this invisible chip off my shoulder attitude, and I'll knock off yours, and we'll see which goes the farthest. Dependable. Most dependable. Dependency. I had then no notion of co-dependency, nor am I sure I know now what it means. Two friends of long standing, from childhood, let's say, one of which has gone on to be a professor of classical literature, the other a gardener, meet every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at a bar near where they grew up, same neighborhood. A couple of beers, a handful of free pretzels, and a game of shut the box, best of 7. Loser buys the first round, though in the end there is nothing to be truly lost or won, because whoever buys the first round the other buys the second. Are they codependent because they depend on each other to be there? As I say, I don't know. Say one or another Tuesday or Wednesday, one of the two doesn't show up. Where's your friend? The bartender asks. Shrug. Well, he's a free agent, I guess, the bartender says. Then the next time. So I missed you yesterday. Yeah, missed being here. And that's it. You know, what I should have said was, when you're a child, a boy who spends every free daylight hour outside, there are never not acorns, sticks, rocks, or dirt that with enough spit you can't make into a ball or a disc. But they can't be made into a game without another to create and argue the rules, without another to win from or lose to, or both at the same time. On the other hand, if he doesn't happen to be there, because no one is completely dependable, you can always pick up 2 likely pine cones and put them in your jacket pocket for later. Something will surely turn up tomorrow.